open this and get it where we need to be. Sorry. This thing's in the way for me. I apologize. So here we go. Maybe. So this is activity 45. It's called precipitating specific contaminants. So that's what you should have written in your online notebook. What we want to do is find out a little bit about what you know about chemical reactions. So if you were in class now, I'd ask you to come to the board or talk to your neighbor about what terms or ideas that you already know about relate to chemical reactions. So think about that. Think about maybe what we did last Friday or earlier this week in the science lab, and what do you know about chemical reactions? Then I have included in the email the link to this video that if I were to push this button, I would go to YouTube and watch a video about chemical versus physical changes. When you go to that YouTube video, take some notes because those notes are going to be important to you, and I'm going to look for them in your notebook. So on to the next page, maybe. Here we go. So these things that are on this target page are evidence of chemical reactions. These are things that should go in your online notebook as well. You can see up here a color change. So of a solution, what it means is a color change of a solution. So if you had something that was colored like Kool-Aid, it now turned green. The formation of a precipitate or precipitate. It's pronounced precipitate, so I should have said it correctly. So, and that means a solid product. So something that was liquid, you poured something in, and there was then a solid product. This one down here, change in the results of a chemical test, like a pH change detected with an indicator. So if at one point it was 8 on the pH scale, and you did something, and then you put in an indicator and it was now a 2 or a 3 or even a 14, that's a change in pH. So that's a change of a chemical test. Up on the top here it says energy change. And we, again, talked about this in the science lab. A temperature change, light, or the generation of electricity. That's an indication of a chemical reaction. An odor change. The disappearance of an original substance. Or the formation of bubbles. This last one is tricky, and it's one that we'll talk about as we get a little bit further into this lesson and the following activities. So make sure that you have all of those things in your online notebook. And I'll go to the next slide. Dissolving is a physical change. If I put sugar in water, it dissolves the sugar. The sugar becomes part of the water. But if you were to think about some of the things that we've experimented and done before, you know that if we evaporate that water, we have the sugar left over. So here is exactly what I talked about. Sugar plus the water. We get a sugar and water solution. But if we let that water evaporate, there's something that'll be left behind. So even though the formation of bubbles is a chemical reaction, dissolving is not. This page says that you learned in activity 37 what dissolves, that some substances dissolve easily or are soluble in water. Other substances do not dissolve and are called insoluble. When solutes react, new substances can form. If the new substances are not soluble in water, they will form a solid. An insoluble solid that forms when two solutes interact is called a precipitate. That's a word that should go in your glossary, as well as the definition. Now, the definition may not make a lot of sense to you, but kind of take it apart slowly and you'll be able to figure out what it means. Here's the challenge. How can you use a chemical reaction to remove a contaminant from a solution? So think about what that means. And we will talk about it on Friday. And if we don't, remind me. Going on to the next slide. So here is exactly what they were talking about. If we take these two substances that are clear, we pour in this liquid, we form something down in this container. This is a precipitate. And then that means that there was a chemical reaction. The next slide talks about the different materials that you'll need. Please don't just snip these and not pay attention to them. A dropper bottle of water, a dropper bottle of 5% sodium carbonate, a dropper bottle of copper chloride, a cup of water, CPUP tray for each pair, CPUP filter funnel for each pair, 2 pieces of filter paper, 1 stir stick, 1 dropper, some paper towels, and it talks down here about worksheet 45.1, but I'm not going to give that to you. I think that you should just make that in your online notebook. Safety issues are a concern. Make sure that you obviously have your goggles on. If you get some of this on your skin or on your clothes, clean it up with water. And if you accidentally spill it, let somebody know. The whole idea here is let's be safe. To the next page. So there are some things that you need to be aware of, that what's representing the wastewater in this activity is the dissolved copper chloride. So we're pretending that this stuff that's in that dropper bottle is the wastewater. The solution added to enable the contaminant to be precipitated out and removed in the activity is the dissolved sodium carbonate. So it is what we are going to add to the wastewater to create that precipitate and then remove it. Something that oftentimes gets confused by kids is precipitation. It's an insoluble solid that forms when two solutes interact. Precipitation and precipitate are not the same thing. That's kind of what this diagram is trying to show you. Precipitation, said that way, is rain or water that falls from the sky. We're forming a precipitate where we're going to create something from a chemical reaction. Next slide. Again, remember we want to hold the dropper vertically when we're dispensing drops. I watched a lot of you do it last week and you had some problems with that. So this is the chart that you're going to create. On the top it should say precipitation reaction. You should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. You can see what needs to be put on it. And I'm guessing that the best way to do this so you can see it is have this video up while you're trying to create it in your notebook. There's a rather lengthy procedure. Please make sure that you read it carefully. If you were in class, I would ask you to read it carefully with your group members, but when you come to class on Friday, you should have already read it. I'm going to create a little Google quiz, not long, a little Google quiz to make sure that you've done what you needed to do. I'm not even going to include it in the email, so it's kind of a trick. Don't tell anybody that I'm going to have that Google quiz. and I will send it to you hidden somehow. I'm not sure exactly how. I just kind of came up with this idea, but there'll be about 5 or 6 questions about the reading that you needed to do, and some questions that need to be answered so that I can tell if you read it. So that's what you need to have ready when you come to class on Friday. Thanks for being good about this. I apologize about the class being goofy, but I know you can do it. Thanks.